secrets of the past are all around us, hidden in our streets, buried under our feet. And in this series, I'll be uncovering those secrets as I explore Britain's most historic towns. I'll decipher physical clues.
You can make out details of her face and her ruff.
And get to know some extraordinary characters who are often overlooked.
He operated like a spy master. They lied, they deceived, they cheated.
With the help of Ben Robinson's Eye in the Sky, I'll discover which towns across the UK reveal the most about each period in British history and find out how those stories still resonate today.
3,880.
More and more individuals are still dying from the plague.
It's quite overwhelming. From the adventurous Elizabethans to the elegant Georgians, from medieval knights through to the height of empire, I'll tell the story of an era through the story of a single town. Today, I'm in Britain's most medieval town. A town that found itself at the centre of an era-defining battle. I think I'm holding my breath. Where powerful merchants stylishly challenged the status quo. So I'm regal.
Or a merchant wife who's breaking rules.
Oh, I like that. Home to a stunning cathedral and an awesome castle, the site of one of the most decisive battles in English history. If the French had won this battle, history would have played out very differently.
Yes, we would have had a French monarchy.
If you want to understand the power and the politics, the cut and thrust of medieval England, Lincoln is the place to come. Modern Lincoln is a picturesque university town where the medieval period is very much still on show, and its 100,000 residents get used to rubbing shoulders with 4 million tourists every year. It's not hard to see the draw. Beyond the cathedral walls, there's a wealth of history woven into the very fabric of a beautifully preserved old town that perches on top of quite a hill. Lincolnshire is fairly flat, so a vantage point like this with clear lines of sight for miles in every direction makes it a prime location for a military stronghold. And there's no doubt that Lincoln Castle saw plenty of action during the Middle Ages. I'm focusing on the medieval period, from the explosive Norman invasion in 1066 until the catastrophic arrival of bubonic plague in 1348. Through almost 3 centuries, conflicts between the crown and the people reshaped England and laid the foundations of identity that are still being built upon today. Worshippers thought an all-powerful church held the keys to heaven, but an evil king could make everyday life a living hell. War, rebellion, and stark inequality put huge strains on the population. But despite the hardship, many in England somehow thrived until that lethal, cataclysmic plague which rocked the pillars of society. Lincoln was witness to so many pivotal moments during this medieval period, but why was the town established here in the first place? 150 miles north of London and 70 miles to the south of York, it was the Romans who put Lindum, as they called it, on the map. As well as lying on a major Roman road, Lincoln was also bisected and connected by major waterways that flowed from the rich farmland out to the North Sea. After the Roman army withdrew from Britain in the 5th century, Lincoln would become a Saxon town that changed very little until William the Conqueror's invading Norman army arrived in 1067. Recognising the strengths of the old Roman fortress, William decided this would be home to one of several huge new cathedrals across England that would become the linchpins of a new Roman Catholic church. Lincoln's would be one of the finest.
In 1072, the Normans begin building their cathedral on the site of a pre-existing Anglo-Saxon church. It was ravaged by fire, almost completely demolished by an earthquake, but it kept coming back, and we can just imagine it teeming with activity, labourers and stonemasons, and then when they paused, worshippers and pilgrims here. Lincoln Cathedral was the beating heart of medieval Lincoln.
It's impossible to resist the magnetism of a structure that stood as the world's tallest building for over 200 years, until its spire fell in the 1500s. Medieval expert Dr. Antonella Lucia Scorpo wants to show me how the cathedral transformed Lincoln from a simple Anglo-Saxon settlement.
It is a magnificent cathedral, and the oldest bits of it are Norman.
They are.
Yeah.
And in this case, William I, I think, is actually using it to make a very clear statement about controlling the north.
Yeah.
That's the start of really Lincoln booming as a center, not just as an ecclesiastical center, a center of power, administration, but also a center of trade and commerce that will continue actually throughout.
Really booming medieval economy.
Indeed.
The busy cathedral boosted footfall to the area. Add to that the security provided by a powerful garrison of soldiers in the castle, and it wasn't long before Lincoln had a bustling high street, complete with merchants' houses.
This is the Norman house
Lovely.
from 1170s.
And
So
that's Norman up there, is it?
the window is, this means that people must have lived on at least the first floor, while the downstairs would have been used for a commercial activity or transaction.
Oh, it's lovely that we've got these bits of Norman Lincoln
It
still
is,
there.
and it's still there.
I love the fact they've still got this market here, and there's still trades going on that would have been here in the Middle Ages. It's brilliant. Lots of people of Lincoln and the surrounding countryside pouring into the city.
Foreign merchants would have been here as well, trading different goods, different products. It's a place of gossip, of sharing news, information.
It must have been really lively, really colourful.
Think about the languages, the sounds, the colours, as you said, the textures as well.
There are loads of tourists here, and there would have been lots of people coming from further afield centuries ago.
And already with the Normans, I mean, coming over, and obviously that brings already a lot of new communities. I mean, we know that the Jewish community, for example, massively, increased, and the marketplace really was the place where you could see a lot of them.
Lincoln's markets really flourished from the late 11th century, with people coming from right across Northern Europe to trade crafts and goods. And the locals here played to their strengths, using the surrounding fertile grazing land to produce much sought-after sheep's wool.
And the producers of the wool, these your sheep?
These are my sheep, yeah. They'll be clipped in sometime around early June.
Yeah.
And then we package it or roll it up and we'll be selling it. There'll be about 2.5 kilos of wool from that sheep. My sheep actually graze around an abbey which was built upon the wool trade initially.
Really?
Yeah, there's a few around the area.
Indeed, and obviously wool was one of the main products that was even exported and made Lincoln a key centre of trade internationally.
Space-hungry sheep and their produce were crucial to Lincoln's medieval economy, and the Normans recognised the need to grease the wheels of commerce with advances in infrastructure. Aerial archaeologist Ben Robinson is using his eye in the sky to get a better look at the transport links that helped Lincoln prosper.
Sailing into the sky now. There we go. That's the view I wanted. Now, Lincoln was at the junction of major Roman roads, and these were still in use, but it also had crucial waterway connections. And if you're trying to move around bulky goods like wool, it's the waterways that are more important than the roads. And this is the Foss Dyke. I can see it's ruler straight. This is an artificial watercourse. It was probably built by the Romans, and in medieval times it was extended, it was widened, it was redug. Now the Trent is in that direction. Once you're into the Trent River system, it goes up into the Humber estuary, so you've got access to the North Sea ports there, up into the Ouse system. You've got the whole of Yorkshire opening up to you as well. It goes south down into the Midlands and all ending up in the Brayford Pool right at the foot of the hill in Lincoln. Transport systems, communications, our network, our infrastructure is absolutely vital to economic development. It was then and it is now.
Lincoln was developing into a thriving economic hub with cash pouring into the city, filling up the coffers of not only its increasingly rich merchants, but also the crown.
To get his cut, the king needed a local tax office. Lincoln Guildhall stands on the site of the medieval town's administrative centre. Many merchants, traders and kings would have passed under the archway here. But it's the ancient documents which are now held above it that dictate how costly or profitable their visit would have been.
Oh, you've got these lovely documents out. Aren't they beautiful?
They're amazing.
The mayor's officer, Richard Story, has retrieved some of the town's most historic archive from under lock and key.
Thank you for getting these documents out for me to have a look at, and at such close quarters as well. This is fantastic. So that's the oldest document you've got
The
here in
oldest
Lincoln.
one that survives, yes.
When does that date to?
That dates to 1157, that's Henry II. It confirms previous privileges as far back as the time of Edward the Confessor, which compels all the merchants of the county of Lincolnshire to come to the city of Lincoln to trade. So if you want to conduct your business, you have to come to Lincoln to do that.
You've got to come here.
You've got to come here. It increases the revenue in the city and thereby it increases revenue to the crown.
The city paid the king directly for the monopoly on trade in the area. This was always a flat rate of tax regardless of profits, a privilege granted to only the most important trading and financial centres in England.
So we pay £180 at this stage to the Crown to hold the city of the King-in-Chief. We account for our own revenue at the Exchequer, and anything we make over and above £180 is for the purse of the city, the common purse.
And was Lincoln making money over and above that rent?
Yes, substantially at that period, we believe, yes. But there was no doubt that the money that formed the additional purse did go to make the ruling elite even wealthier than they had been for years.
The peasants weren't doing very well.
No, not really.
These ancient documents and subsequent royal charters laid the foundations upon which Lincoln's elite built their most profitable trade.
So throughout this period, how important is wool? Is it the kind of primary trade?
It does start to develop certainly after 1262, when a man called John de Blyton, about 1307, he exported the equivalent of 33,000 kilos of wool through the city of Lincoln.
That sounds fairly impressive.
It's hugely impressive.
Yeah. The Crown's trust in Lincoln is obvious from the impressive relics here at the Guildhall. By the time King Richard II gifted this sword to the mayor, the senior townsmen were reaping healthy profits. And as Lincoln's wool trade grew, so did traffic to the city, demanding improvements in the road network serving the town.
And we're just coming up to this very beautiful bridge. Is that medieval?
Yeah. It is 1160 the High Bridge was built.
The River Witham runs right through the town and joins the Fosdyke Canal at Brayford Pool. This bridge replaced an archaic ford, propelling the city towards a more permanent, prosperous future.
It was as important as the water networks to one extent. So those people who didn't have enough goods to move them by boat along the river could still bring them in and access the city markets, and the commerce could continue.
And building bridges like this, that's part of reinvesting that wealth that's coming to the city.
Absolutely.
I think I'm holding my breath.
With its farmland, transport networks and thriving commercial hub, Lincoln in the 12th century was a key player in England's economy and was poised to become one of the nation's 5 most populous towns.
But then King John arrived on the throne, greedy, rapacious, not the best liked of kings, and trouble was brewing on the horizon.
I'm in Lincoln, exploring the advances that revamped medieval England in the 11th to 14th centuries. A wool-fueled economic boom placed this cathedral town firmly within the Crown's favour, but the good times weren't to last. Relations between Norman kings and the wealthy barons who actually controlled places like Lincoln had always been strained, but outright conflict had been avoided.
When Richard the Lionheart died in 1199, the barons accepted his brother as king. It was a decision they would come to regret.
A hapless military leader, early in his reign, John lost Normandy and its huge revenues to the King of France. To try to compensate, he waged expensive and largely unsuccessful campaigns in Ireland and Wales, mercilessly taxing his barons, making ever more enemies along the way.
In 1208, John managed to fall out with the Pope over who should be Archbishop of Canterbury, and the result was a papal interdict. This was a colossal price to pay. Religion was so important in people's lives, and this interdict meant that people couldn't be buried in consecrated ground. John had effectively locked his subjects out of heaven. Matthew Parris, the chronicler of St Albans, gives us a bit of an insight into just how unpopular John had become. He wrote, "Foul as it is, hell itself is defiled by the foulness of John."
Within 5 years, his dominance had faltered. King John was forced to agree to Magna Carta, limiting the power of the crown for the first time in English history, guaranteeing many rights to his angry barons.
For a while, it seemed like things would proceed on an even keel. But then he started to flout the terms of the Magna Carta, and the political situation became dangerously unstable.
John's rebel barons turned to France's Prince Louis to challenge the English throne, and key parts of the country soon became war zones. By 1217, huge swathes of England lay in rebel hands, and things were looking bleak for the future of the Norman dynasty. Professor Louise Wilkinson has studied this critical moment and how the fate of England would come to be decided at Lincoln.
So what was Lincoln's role in this? What was the official position here? Were they supporting John or supporting the French claim to the throne?
Within the castle, they were very, very firmly royalist. But in the city, I think they were definitely more sympathetic towards the rebels.
But who was in charge here at the castle?
Here at the castle, there was a brilliant noblewoman, then in her 60s, called Nicola de la Haye. She governed the royal castle on behalf of the king.
Right.
So she presided over the prison, over the life of the castle and its garrison.
Yeah.
So she was the leading royal figure in the locality.
She sounds like an extraordinary woman.
Yeah, I think Nicola really was an iron lady of her day. When the rebels occupied the city early in 1217, when Prince Louis came and visited in February, she held the garrison very loyally.
Oh my goodness, so he's here.
So
he's
came
here,
in February,
presumably
briefly.
expecting to take the castle, to
I think he was very
take the north.
Yeah, hoping
Yeah.
to take the castle, being the operative word. He didn't.
But she's kind of holed up in here, and there are, if not French forces, then French sympathisers out there in the town.
Yeah, a whole sea of danger just out in the town. So it must have been really incredibly stressful for her.
Yeah.
Outnumbered more than 3 to 1, Nicola de la Haye and her besieged forces were almost defeated. This battle for Lincoln was the last throw of the dice, and the Royalists were depending on a 70-year-old knight, William Marshall, and his scratch army approaching from the west.
Ben Robinson is poised to show us the field of battle and demonstrate William Marshall's strategy as it played out on the 20th of May, 1217.
I can see why this is one of the great castles of England. The town walls ran in a circuit enclosing the cathedral. So it's a fort within a fort. We've got Nicola de la Haye in there, stoutly defending the castle. We've got the rebel barons and the French surrounding the castle. Now, William Marshall knew that if they came round from the northwest, they would find a weak spot. What happens is he splits his force into 3. Nicola de la Haye let the force of crossbowmen through that gate, and they charge across the bailey to the east wall there, popped up on the battlements and start letting loose their crossbow bolts on the French and rebel army in the square there. Meanwhile, Marshall is coming round this side of the castle. At exactly the same time, through the north, another force is forcing their way down this street. So all these forces are now converging onto the east side of the castle. Suddenly, the defenders of the town, the rebels, are caught in a trap. And what had been a safe haven was now a death trap for them.
So it all comes to a climax here, just outside the castle.
It does. The royalists pushed out towards the cathedral, and there was dramatic hand-to-hand fighting in the city streets. In the meantime, the crossbowmen were raining down their bolts on the rebel barons and the knights below them. It was brutal.
So what happens at the end?
By the middle of the afternoon on the day of the battle, the French just turned around. And they referred to the battle actually as the Fair of Lincoln, really largely just to taunt Louis and the French for losing such a dramatic battle.
If the French had won this battle, history would have played out very differently.
Yes, we would have had a French monarchy. So really, it's probably the second most important battle in English history after Hastings.
The weapon that had tipped the battle in Nicola de Hay's favour was the crossbow. Expert medieval armourer Todd Todeschini is showing me just why the royalist crossbowmen, with their weapons of choice, were so lethally effective.
Todd! Hi!
How you doing?
Hello. That's a crossbow.
It's a crossbow,
I
yeah.
can recognise that. And that looks more like an ordinary longbow.
You know, we think of the English always using the longbow, but that's not at all the case. So sieges, particularly, crossbows are very well suited to.
What were the advantages of a crossbow compared with a longbow?
We've got a crenellation here. With the crossbow, you can shoot from here, so you're well covered. What I can also do, and I can't do with the longbow, is I can get right out and I can shoot here. But also, I can shoot down, and I can shoot left, and I can shoot right. When I'm shooting this one, I have to shoot from back here, because what I can't have is I can't have the bow limbs hitting the wall or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's great for an open field where you've got all the room you need, but where you're tight, it just doesn't work.
Crossbows may have been around for centuries, but it was the streamlined version of the 11th century that allowed the royalists to defend Lincoln Castle. Under Todd's expert guidance, I'm going to see if I've got what it takes to be a medieval sharpshooter.
Aim it down, because you're quite high at the moment, I think. So aim it down a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. Try that. So left arm down.
Whoa!
Unlucky.
The melon survived.
The melon survived another day.
I think I'd need a bit more training before I was able to defend a medieval castle.
Yes, but actually, don't forget, look at that. I mean, all of those would fit within the torso of a person. So, yes, you might not have got their heart, but they're not having a good day.
The Battle of Lincoln turned around the fortunes of Marshall, de la Haye and the Royalists. With King John now dead and his 9-year-old son on the throne, there was hope for a second chance at the Magna Carta's steadying powers. But while the powerful men of England found new confidence, it was the common people that continued to suffer from neglect and, for one minority, devastating demonisation. I'm in Lincoln, discovering how some aspects of medieval life in England still resonate today. This vibrant cathedral town had become a flourishing centre of trade and commerce, lining the pockets of the crown and local merchants. New buildings, bridges and waterways ensured that even more wealth was flowing through the urban community. But outside the city walls, for most people, simply surviving was still a struggle.
Ben is looking at the evidence for what life was like for the rural population out in the countryside around medieval Lincoln.
Now, at ground level, it's a little bit difficult to make out what's going on, but from above, all these shapes, all these patterns start to make sense. And this is absolutely thrilling because I can see the layout of an entire lost medieval village. I can see individual streets here, these slightly sunken areas with raised banks on either side, and you can really pick out the plan of the village. And the cottagers would have had animals in the backyard. You've got barns, so obviously they're farming the land. Those little circles, these are probably dovecots. In order to keep doves or pigeons for their eggs and their meat, you had to have a licence, and the only people that would get licences were the lords of the manor. So if I've got a couple of dovecots in there, I've probably found the site of the manor house. I think the fact of the matter for a lot of these deserted settlements was a combination of things, a combination of environmental factors, economic factors that just conspired against them. And then you've got landlords turning vast areas over to sheep farming. You've got deteriorating weather conditions, wet summers, wet winters. You can't grow much, so people are literally starving. Put all this together and you get formerly thriving communities just disappearing, not necessarily overnight, but over a period of time.
Whether it was ruined harvests or rebel barons, in 1217 the King of England had a lot on his plate. The fact that he was 9 years old hardly helped. But his guardians, the Knight William Marshal among them, knew what to do to calm the population down.
Sealed inside the castle is Lincoln's own Magna Carta. Now, John, and in fact the barons, would go on to renege on the terms of that charter. So it was edited and reissued under the boy king, Henry III. But alongside Magna Carta, Henry III issues this document, this charter, and I think it deserves much more recognition than it usually gets. This is the Charter of the Forest.
It's essentially a piece of legislation that would have a huge impact on the lives of ordinary people, that enormous sector of society that led a hand-to-mouth existence and could easily find themselves starving after a poor harvest. While just out of grasp in the vast royal forests lay a potentially life-saving source of food and fuel. I've met up with Dr. Claire Kennan in the ancient woodland of Lincolnshire's Doddington Hall to discover why the Charter of the Forest was necessary.
William the Conqueror makes large areas of the country royal forest.
Yeah.
And then by the time we get to King John's reign, a third of England is royal forest.
So this disquiet had been brewing for a couple of hundred years then?
For a long time, yeah.
The royals essentially locked out the common people from forest lands and the rich natural bounty that was found there. Grazing pastures, wild game and forest fruits were strictly out of bounds.
Previously, there were really harsh penalties in place for things such as felling trees for firewood. If you were caught poaching a boar or a deer, you could be mutilated, blinded, or even executed. The foresters as well would often fine entire villages if perpetrators couldn't be found.
Really?
So they were really severe penalties. But under the Charter of the Forest, a lot of these restrictive rules and regulations are removed.
I mean, it must have made a massive difference to people, you know, just being able to use land, freed them up to, to do this.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
Chop down trees, make a fire.
Forage for ingredients for soup, definitely.
I did not forage for these ingredients.
No.
Somebody else foraged for them in a supermarket, I imagine.
While the Magna Carta has hogged the limelight, the lesser-known Charter of the Forest was arguably more important for ordinary people. Landowner at Doddington Hall, Claire Birch, honours her duty to provide public access to the woodlands.
I think it's incredibly important. There's a lot of research, isn't there, about how access to the countryside and to nature is so important for mental and physical health. And, you know, as landowners, we've got a huge asset here and it's a massive opportunity to do stuff along those lines.
What sort of things do people come and do in your
We have lots of people who walk and they come and pick blackberries. And more recently, we tarmacked over a big farm track and it actually joins the village to one of the Sustrans cycle routes.
Oh, yeah.
So you can basically get the whole way into Lincoln without without having to be anywhere near cars.
I'm sure that many people's lives in medieval England were absolutely miserable, but this Charter of the Forest meant that for some of the common people, their lives were set to improve somewhat. But there was a section of society in medieval Lincoln that was absolutely thriving, and that was the Jewish community.
A small number of Jewish people arrived in England with the Normans from northern France in the later 11th century. One of the most successful Jewish communities was established here in Lincoln, second in importance only to London. And Professor Anthony Bale is showing me why this community flourished here.
We're walking down a hill called Steep Hill, very steep hill, which runs down from the cathedral and the castle. And we know that the Jews, they actually lived throughout Lincoln, but they were concentrated on this street. And Aaron of Lincoln, one of the richest Jews, he owned the property on the west side of the street.
I mean, this must have been a very high-value property. We're right, you know, we're very close to the cathedral. You can hear the bells clearly.
But it's also the safest place to live because it's right next to the castle. And that's where the Jews would go to if they were in danger, because technically the Jews were the king's property, and so attacking the Jews was to attack the king.
The building of Norman England, including Lincoln's own cathedral, had in part been bankrolled by Jewish financiers. While Christians were forbidden from money lending for profit, Jews were not. In return, the Crown's protection allowed a lively Jewish community to become well established and largely integrated here by the mid-12th century.
That's a beautiful building.
But only similar to the kinds of buildings that wealthy Normans were building.
And what about what the Jews were doing here? Was there a specific trade or a specific function in society that they were performing?
We know that some Jews, like Aaron of Lincoln, could become phenomenally wealthy, but most Jews weren't. Most Jews had very little, and they relied on the normal kind of crafts and trades that medieval people did in a city like this. Jews in medieval England couldn't be full citizens. So they were able to live individual lives, but their property, technically, was part of the king's treasury.
It's almost like they're sort of permitted to exist in a largely Christian society, but within very strict rules.
In somewhere like Lincoln, where the church, the crown, the Jews, and other groups like Flemings, Lombards, Templars, merchants are all rubbing up against each other. Sometimes it's very, very harmonious and that people can prosper there.
Yeah.
But at other times, then those frictions come to a head.
Following strong anti-Jewish guidance from the Pope in the early 1200s, the English crown started relying more on alternative funds, reducing their protection of the Jews and imposing hefty taxes upon them. Forced into claiming back the money they'd lent, the Jews of medieval England were ostracised and became desperately unpopular amongst a largely Christian society. The disharmony in Lincoln came to a head in 1255, when the body of an 8-year-old boy was said to have been found in a well near the town. It was the Jewish community that was accused of his murder. His remains were supposedly entombed in the cathedral in a shrine that once stood here.
This was the shrine that pilgrims came to from the 13th century to celebrate the memory of little St. Hugh. About 90 Jews were taken from Lincoln to the Tower of London, and 18 or 19 of those were put to death.
And was there any evidence that it was the Jews that had killed this little boy?
Not what we'd call evidence. Already by this point, this was the 4th or 5th time this allegation had been made against the Jews. This was really a kind of what we'd now perhaps call an urban myth. All these allegations take place in big Norman cathedral cities where Benedictine abbeys are developing shrines to these boy saints.
Yeah.
And so there are actual kind of benefits to making this allegation.
The death of a child is a terrible thing. Yeah. But then what it turns into is persecution of the Jewish communities.
But one way the Normans are perhaps able to redefine themselves as English is then by defining the Jews as not being part of them. You see in France, Germany, England, various laws about the way Jews have to dress. In Germany, sometimes it's through the hat, but in England, Jews have to wear a yellow badge made out of felt.
Yeah.
So this is really a very chilling and very public way of marking the Jews out as a people apart.
Yeah, it echoes down the centuries.
Absolutely.
After becoming entirely marginalised, the Jews were ultimately expelled from England in 1290, not to return for over 350 years.
I find this story of little Hugh so distressing. It seems dreadfully familiar, this idea of a community being scapegoated for a crime, a minority being persecuted. It rattles down the centuries. The Holocaust of the 20th century has extremely deep roots. Jews being marked out, being made to wear yellow stars. And I think we still see some of that today. We see minorities being othered, being persecuted in apparently enlightened, developed countries. It is medieval.
Today, the city's cathedral welcomes all faiths and none to commemorate its medieval heritage, to be uplifted by its architectural grandeur and aesthetic pleasure. But in 1348, the faith of Lincoln's medieval congregation would be sorely tested by the arrival of a disease that ripped through the population and shocked society to its core.
I'm in Lincoln, where I'm immersing myself in the Middle Ages, looking at architecture and economy, politics and prejudice.
I've seen how power struggles between medieval England's elite sowed the seeds of democracy, but did little to reduce vast inequality between social classes. In the eyes of the Church, all people were subjects of a greater power, a message that needed to be constantly reinforced. And nowhere were these mind games more evident than in Lincoln's magnificent cathedral.
This architecture is designed to be awesome, to give you a real sense of the sublime, of being a small part of something much, much bigger. But there are also some tiny, intricate details to be found here, hidden messages among the stonemasonry. There's some really, really curious images. There's a man's face up there, his hands are curling over the parapet, and his hair is flowing back as though it were a lion's mane. I like this jovial fellow with his cap and his prodigious sideburns. I wonder if he's one of the stonemasons. This one's really weird, look at that. A woman playing a fiddle, but she has the hindquarters of a cow? And then there's a man behind her. He has wings. You think he might be an angel, but then look at his body. It's covered with lizard-like scales. This is the kind of medieval imagination gone wild.
For the Church to remain all-powerful in a time of deep superstition, notions of the afterlife, whether heaven or hell, had to be omnipresent. For a largely illiterate congregation, imagery like this was worth far more than 1,000 words.
Art has the potential to let us into the medieval mind. So I'm headed to the Cathedral Library to look at a very special 700-year-old book.
Commissioned by wealthy landowner Sir Geoffrey Luttrell, this celebrated manuscript favourably depicts everyday life in 14th century Lincolnshire.
It contains 150 Psalms of the Old Testament, but presented in this kind of mind-bending framework of images.
Medieval art historian Professor Alex Bovey is helping me decipher the images in this beautiful facsimile of the book.
Like this lady who's been spinning and she's interrupted her activity to go out and feed her chickens.
So that looks quite normal. That's like a kind of normal domestic scene. And then you've got a fish with a man's head with a beard.
Right, and these kind of jarring pivots between everyday life and natural world. And then, yeah, these mad creatures.
He's just, I might have a go at drawing him, actually.
Between the 13th and 14th centuries, English illuminated manuscripts abound with inventive and perplexing imagery. But Sir Luttrell's text, completed by around 1340, is surely one of the most intricate.
I can see some similarities perhaps with Viking art, with Anglo-Saxon art, and even going back to the Iron Age where you've got those kind of hidden faces and animals mixed up with geometric patterns.
It's a very particular response to a kind of a Christian system that has a heaven and it has a hell and it has a world that is overrun with sinful bodies and with rejoicing bodies, and so yeah, I think there is a quite a kind of complex inheritance in this imagery.
I love this juxtaposition of the pious text, the Psalms, and then these really playful, funny characters in the margins. I mean, they're just weird and wonderful. The Luttrell Psalter is teeming with those fantastic beasts, but it also gives us a glimpse of the agricultural year and medieval fashion.
By the mid-1300s, the streets of Lincoln would have been awash with a multicultural mélange of styles and fabrics. But no matter your social standing or your costume, by 1348, everyone was at risk of falling foul of the Black Death. Plague had reached Britain's shores. Costume historian Pauline Loven and hair and makeup historian Olivia Free are going to help me understand how nice clothes became about much more than just looking good at the time of a lethal pandemic.
This looks like an undergarment. I'm going to have to get out of this, aren't I?
Yes, afraid so.
Start getting undressed. That's your cue to leave.
It's thought that the Black Death wiped out almost half of England's population, forcing a social upheaval.
Oh, I think it's a bit of a shame to have covered up the gorgeous dress underneath. Yeah.
But for those that survived, there was hope for a better life, as labour shortages meant increased wages, reduced taxes, and an abundance of now affordable commodities.
Who would have been able to wear materials like this, dresses like this?
Anybody who could afford it. So after the Black Death, the population is so reduced.
Yeah.
So everybody's moving and adjusting their position, and they do it through clothing, and if they can afford to dress like a king, they will.
If you can dress in a richer fashion than actually befits your social standing, you could possibly bewitch people into thinking that you really were
more
the
significant.
higher status individual.
Yes, than your birth would suggest. Sumptuary laws were introduced to make fabrics like that exclusive to the elite, and particularly cloth of gold. It was the royal family only.
Right, so I'm regal.
Yes, regal or a merchant wife who's breaking rules.
Oh, I like that.
Scrambling to maintain the status quo, King Edward III attempted to quash upward mobility with his sumptuary laws. Members of each of the 7 social categories were easily identified by their dress and personal grooming.
If women are wearing makeup for their husbands alone, and only if it's natural makeup, was it allowed. But it was lightening. It wasn't all white. It was if you were pale, then that meant that you were a wealthy lady, you were staying indoors, you weren't doing any hard labour in the sun.
So you certainly wouldn't want to effect a tan then? Fake tan would be...
Absolutely not. No, indeed.
That would make you look like a working class woman.
Yes. But you still had to look healthy.
Like I'm not just about to drop dead of the Black Death.
Sometimes physicians were called in to make somebody look healthy. Often kings, lords, particularly the men actually, would dye their hair. And it's all about maintaining this look of a young, robust man.
Yeah.
So a way of keeping hold of his power is looking healthy.
I think world leaders are still doing this, don't you?
Absolutely, yes.
The church relaxed its rules on makeup, but still strictly enforced veiling of hair, an excellent excuse for some high-fashion accessorising.
So what did the sumptuary law say about veils?
It restricted veiling to a value, so that if you were a lower status, you could only spend so much on a veil.
Isn't it fascinating that there's this constant push and pull between the attempt at controlling people and the way they're expressing themselves, and then people managing to push back
to use a veil as a way of actually expressing your status in society.
It's lovely, isn't it?
Yeah. I really think at this point now I need to see myself. I've got no idea what I look like. It's got a mirror.
Yes, indeed.
Oh my goodness. That's extraordinary. I feel different. I think it's really interesting putting these clothes on. I think I know what it felt like to be an elite lady in Lincoln in the 14th century.
It's stunning as well.
Eat your heart out, Game of Thrones. I've just stepped out of the pages of the Luttrell Psalter.
King Edward's sumptuary laws on these fineries had little effect on the huge upheavals that followed the Black Death, an event that brought to an end an era which had seen Lincoln at the heart of the action. A town whose entrepreneurs refined the advances that reshaped the nation's economics, where the great powers of the monarchy and the barons clashed in a brutal town centre battle for the future of England. And home to a cathedral rich in stories and covert messages that dominated the town and its people.
Lincoln beautifully, compellingly captures the story of medieval England.